Hey Rebel Rouser, I'm Alan Voivod and this is Star Wars 7x7, your daily dose of Star Wars joy. And thank you so much for joining me for it. And thank you especially to the people who make this possible for you every single day with their support at patreon.com/SW7x7. So this is our first Jedi Business episode related to the Acolyte. And the Jedi Business episodes, if you're not familiar with them, are where we talk about viewership ratings or box office numbers or things of that nature. And it turns out that it's a little bit more complicated with the Acolyte than what we've done in previous years. And that's because there is a new proliferation of streaming service viewership ratings services. Previously, we were just looking at the Nielsen numbers when they came out, and those things are delayed like 4 weeks, so we would be well into a series before we actually had some real numbers to talk about. But since then, services like Real Good and Just Watch and Samba and Luminate have come out, and they have their own reporting that they're sharing, and it's a lot more timely in comparison to what Nielsen is putting out. And none of these services are giving a full and complete picture of what the actual viewership minutes are for the Acolyte or anything else that they're tracking, right? They all have different sample sizes that they're pulling from. The methodology that they're using is all different. Some of them are more transparent than others with their methods of data collection and the way that they report their viewership numbers. But the thing I wanted to focus on for this initial installment of Jedi Business is the fact that there is a certain corner of the internet that has been looking for any excuse to say bad things about the Acolyte, regardless of whether those things are actually deserved, and it's because of what the Acolyte represents and who the people are making the Acolyte and what they represent. And as a result, when one of the viewership rating services notes that the Acolyte has dropped out of the top 10, that corner of the internet starts crowing and saying this is proof that the Acolyte is bad and that it's because Disney went woke and all of this stuff. And I'm here to tell you that the data does not support that. Specifically, if we're really going to talk about how well the Acolyte is performing, then it really should be compared as an apples to apples situation. And to do that, one of the things that it makes sense to do is to remove unscripted, aka reality style programming, out of the equation. It wouldn't make sense to judge the Acolyte or The Bear or Bridgerton or any of these series against, say, Keeping Up with the Kardashians, right? Like, it just doesn't make sense at all. And yet, the Luminate data that is being cited is including 4 different reality style / unscripted programs in its top 10. Those would be Worst Roommate Ever, Love Island USA, Owning Manhattan, and America's Sweethearts, the Dallas Cowboys cheerleaders, right? So really, those should be removed from the equation. Out of all the services I looked at, they're the only ones that are including unscripted stuff in their top 10. However, they do something that, say, for example, Samba also does, which is that they break existing stuff up into seasons. So for example, on a top 10 list from Luminate, you might see both season 3 and season 2 of Bridgerton, whereas on some other services, like say Real Good or Nielsen, they include every season into how they report Bridgerton's performance. So we have Luminate data through July 4th. As of the time that I'm recording this, we only have Samba TV data through June 23rd. And for the 3 weeks that the Acolyte would have been eligible to appear on Samba's streaming charts, they placed 7th, 8th, and 6th in order. That's the weeks of June 19th, June 16th, and June 23rd. But even that comes with a caveat, because the way Samba does it, they include movies in their streaming top charts. And I don't think that's really an apples to apples comparison either. So in that sense, you would put the Acolyte even higher in the streaming situation, because you wouldn't want to count things like Hitman and Trigger Warning and Godzilla -1 and Under Paris and so on and so forth. Then you have the service Real Good, which was recently cited by, was either Screen Rant or Collider, I can't remember which, but they put their streaming ratings out And The Acolyte looks even better with that. For the week of June 6th, The Acolyte was #1 on their streaming charts. And from there, it's been ping-ponging around. It went down to #3 and then down to #8 and back up to #5 for the most recent one we have right now, which is the week of June 27th. And to be perfectly honest, I actually think The Acolyte's numbers probably ought to be lower on this one. And the reason why I say that is because it doesn't look like they are taking into account Real Good Isn't every single streaming service out there. Like, I don't think Peacock is a part of what's happening here, and there may be a couple of shows on a couple of other networks that might affect where The Acolyte falls in all of this. And then there's another streaming viewership measurement service called Just Watch, and I don't have a lot of information about them, but they have The Acolyte ping-ponging around in the same kind of area, 3rd and then 7th and 5th, and I don't have complete data on them. The point of all of this is to say that when you look at the various streaming viewership rating measurement services and you start comparing things from an apples to apples perspective, where you're looking at original scripted programming, the end result is that The Acolyte is doing just fine with viewership ratings, and that the narratives trying to suggest otherwise are just not accurate. Now, one last thing I'll flag about this is what Nielsen actually said about The Acolyte's performance. We've been tracking Nielsen numbers on all of the series since, I think, season 2 of The Mandalorian, basically. There were 488 million minutes watched for The Acolyte in the week that Nielsen has reported, which is June 3rd through June 9th. That was good enough for 7th place in the top 10. The show that's #1 for that reported week is this thing, Eric, that's on Netflix. It's a 6-episode season thing with Benedict Cumberbatch in it. It had 926 million minutes viewed. And this also kind of raises the apples to apples comparative question, where you might ask if it's fair to compare The Acolyte's performance as a weekly releasing series to something like Eric, which drops all of its episodes at once. But if we do a little math, just a little math, really quickly, if you divide the total number of minutes viewed by the number of minutes in the actual show, then it turns out The Acolyte has a much better viewership than Eric does. This does require a couple of assumptions, like, for example, that a person is only watching it once and they are watching every single minute of the show, so they're not skipping credits and they're not skipping intros and whatnot. But if you look at the amount of minutes in Eric overall that are being measured and the amount of minutes that are in The Acolyte being measured, there were approximately 2.9 million people who watched Eric, and there were 6.1 million people who watched The Acolyte in that period. And again, those numbers are probably conservative, probably underreported because of just, the way the math works. So the bottom line is that The Acolyte is doing just fine in streaming viewership, and any narratives to the contrary should be viewed with, at worst, deep suspicion, and at best, a healthy skepticism. And that's what I've got for you on our Jedi Business viewership ratings discussion about The Acolyte, and that's going to do it for this episode of the podcast. If you enjoyed the show, please help me get it out to more people who might be interested in this daily dose of Star Wars joy, and it's not usually like this, as you know, but I'm grateful that you stuck with me to this point, and I hope you'll consider telling other folks you know that this podcast exists for them. I hope you'll consider telling the algorithms it's worth sharing with other people with your likes and your comments and your ratings and your reviews and your subscribes and follows and joins and all that fun stuff. And you can even help me as an independent creator continue to produce this dose of Star Wars joy, and you can learn more about that at patreon.com/SW7X7. And it just remains for me to say thank you so much for joining me, as always, and may the Force be with you, wherever in the world you may be.
7x7 is not endorsed or sponsored yet by Lucasfilm Limited, Disney, or 20th Century Fox, and is intended for entertainment and information purposes only. Star Wars, the Star Wars logo, all names and pictures of Star Wars characters, vehicles, and any other Star Wars related items are registered trademarks and/or copyrights of Lucasfilm Limited, or their respective trademark and copyright holders. May the Force be with them. All original content is copyrighted by Star Wars 7x7. We hope you love it.